Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report, and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Steve Lance. Let's take a look at some of the stories we have coming up for you today. CCP virus cases are surging across the U.S., and average daily cases in Washington, D.C. have skyrocketed since Thanksgiving. If you are currently abroad and your U.S. passport has expired, you may be able to use that passport to return to the United States. And trust in legacy news media has been polling at record lows. We had a chance to speak with veteran writer and journalist John Sullivan to explore the current state of journalism and why more Americans have lost their trust in the media. The nation's capital has become a hotspot for the CCP virus. Despite DC's high vaccination rate, cases continue to soar. Daily cases have gone from 60 per day around Thanksgiving time to about 2,000 right now. That's an increase of over 3,000%. Maryland and Virginia, along with many areas throughout the country, are experiencing a similar surge. Daily cases in the U.S. recently surpassed the peak of the Delta variant, but hospitalizations remain low compared to earlier this year. However, because of the lower hospitalization rates, the CDC has cut the isolation and quarantine time in half, from 10 days now down to 5. Meanwhile, schools and businesses across the country are shutting down and returning back to remote learning. Over Christmas weekend, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia all reported record case numbers since the start of the pandemic. On Monday, Illinois Democratic Representative Bobby Rush confirmed that he has tested positive for the CCP virus after being fully vaccinated. Congressman Rush has also recently received a booster shot. He says, "I am feeling fine and currently have no symptoms," the Chicago Democrat said on Twitter. Representative Rush is 75 years old and is also a cancer survivor. He underwent surgery and chemotherapy in 2008 and is now serving his 15th term in Congress. Numerous members of Congress have tested positive for the CCP virus over the past few weeks, including Representative Nicole Maliotakis and Barbara Lee, as well as Senators Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker. President Joe Biden signed the National Defense Authorization Act into law, authorizing $768 billion in military spending for national defense programs. Representative Mike Rogers, a ranking member on the Armed Services Committee, praised the bill's crucial funding increase of $25 billion to focus on competition with China and Russia, while the Democrats applauded provisions in the bill overhauling how the military justice system handles sexual assault. Republicans touted success in blocking an effort to add women to the draft, as well as an inclusion of a bar of dishonorable discharges for service members who refuse the CCP virus vaccine. And in the national defense budget, the Biden administration has set aside billions of dollars to deter Russian aggression in Europe. U.S. officials are now set to talk with Russian officials at the start of the new year because of rising tensions over Ukraine. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more on this.
Biden administration officials have marked their calendars for security talks with Russian officials for January 10th. But it's looking like these U.S.-Russia talks are pushed into the spotlight even sooner now. President Biden is expected to call Russian President Putin tomorrow. The two world leaders are expected to discuss a range of topics, including those diplomatic discussions set for January, but other details are slim right now. But quickly, let's review some details kind of going on in the background that shed some light on America's involvement in this Russia-Ukraine tension. U.S. government officials are keeping a keen eye on Ukraine's border, where Russian troops were holding months-long drills. Over the weekend, Russia reportedly withdrew around 10,000 troops from the border, just ahead of the U.S.-Russia security talks. Both countries are expected to lay their concerns on the table. The U.S. right now is concerned that Russia is planning to invade Ukraine. U.S. intelligence officials have warned Ukraine and other allies that Russia could launch an attack in the next few weeks. President Joe Biden, in his last discussion with Putin, warned that economic consequences will follow if Putin were to order an invasion. Putin similarly warned NATO forces not to expand into Ukraine. Earlier this month, Russia unveiled a wish list of security proposals it wants to negotiate, including a promise NATO would give up any military activity in Eastern Europe and Ukraine. The Biden administration has said some of Russia's security proposals are unacceptable. But the U.S. and NATO are still working towards what they call principled diplomacy with Russia. And Russian officials are set to meet with NATO officials after their meeting with the U.S. So it really looks like all of the key players here are sort of trying to come together and come to some sort of an agreement to de-escalate these tensions. The State Department and the White House will have more information on these U.S.-Russia talks in the coming days. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
John Sullivan is a British political commentator and journalist. He was a senior policy writer and speechwriter for Margaret Thatcher when she was the British Prime Minister. He also served as vice president and executive editor of Radio Free Europe. We asked him about his thoughts on the current state of journalism. Here's a look at what he had to say. John O'Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
What is your take right now on the state of the media? And if you could give us a little bit of history of how it's evolved, where it was and where you think it is, and everything in between.
I think that what we call the mainstream media or the establishment media, I think that they are in an extremely weak and dangerous and sickly state. There's always been, if you examine it carefully, there's always been a bias towards the left, towards liberalism, we would once have said, in the mainstream media in America. It's slightly more balanced in England. What's really changed recently in American mainstream media is that in the past, journalists didn't feel that they were biased to the left. They were, but it was a subtle bias, and it was the bias that often comes from the fact that everyone in the room thinks the same thing. They're trying to be honest, but they never meet different opinions. Now it's changed because the reaction to Donald Trump on the part of the media, it was happening before, but nonetheless it became more intense. The reaction to Donald Trump has been to persuade journalists that they want to throw aside any attempt to be impartial, let alone objective, and instead they will, in a sense, report their opinions of what is the case, rather than what a fair-minded analysis suggests is the case. And they've been quite open about it. They've said that Donald Trump is too dangerous for journalists to be impartial or to give him a fair hearing. Well, that's not for them to say. After all, other people may disagree, and if they do, everybody wants to be able to look at all of the evidence in a fair way in order to reach a correct and sensible conclusion. Journalism now is so distrusted in higher journalism, mainstream journalism is so distrusted in the United States that it's damaging its own arguments.
Now, would you say that that falls into the category, there's that term out there called activist journalism?
Well, that's what I think they call it themselves, yes. It's better than calling it biased journalism or unfair journalism or to use another word, lies.
Now, do you think that people right now tend to like being in that echo chamber and hearing things that are pleasing to their political views, or do you think there is a desire for a media outlet or a media that does give you the facts even if you don't like what you hear?
I think there's always been a demand for such a program, such a news agency, such a newspaper. The problem is it's probably not a 98% of the audience opinion. I think people who value the high quality, honest reporting, reporting which is distinct from opinion, but opinion is nonetheless rooted in reality and not just a wild surmise. I think arts reporting, which does a service to the reader, but also to the artistic community in maintaining high standards. I think all of those things, they have an audience. It's a niche audience. How big a niche? I don't think we ever know until we try. And I think, I would urge people who are putting money into the media and corporations and so on, to think of doing the very best they can do in the area they're doing it. Maybe it's popular magazine journalism. Popular magazine journalism can be wonderful if it's done with integrity and with intelligence and with a commitment to honesty. It's a mistake to think that popular journalism is necessarily low quality.
John O'Sullivan, thank you.
Thank you.
If you're currently abroad and your U.S. passport is expired on or after January 1st, 2020, you may be able to use that expired passport to return to the United States. That is up until March 31st, 2022. But you do not qualify to travel on your expired passport if your passport has been damaged or altered. Recent expired U.S. passports cannot be used to travel from the United States to an international destination or to travel to a foreign country. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid died on Thursday at the age of 82. He's Nevada's longest-serving member of Congress. His wife Landra Reid said in a statement that the late senator had passed away peacefully, surrounded by family, following a courageous 4-year battle with pancreatic cancer. Harry Reid served in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate from 1983 to 2017, including as Senate Majority Leader from 2005 to 2015. The Smithsonian will temporarily close 4 museums. Over the last few days, the Smithsonian has seen an increase in positive COVID cases, resulting in quarantine periods among the staff members. 4 museums in total are closed effective December 29th and are scheduled to reopen on January 3rd, 2022. The Smithsonian said that the closures of the museums will allow for reallocating staff and keeping all other museums open for the remainder of the week. President Joe Biden signed an executive order finalizing a pay raise for civilian federal employees. The raise is set to kick in 2022. Communism and socialism appear to be losing the stigma that was once associated with these ideologies. We ask author Mary Eberstadt why she thinks that these very ideologies associated with over 100 million unnatural deaths across the world have been embraced by today's younger generation. A 130-year-old time capsule filled with history was just found in Richmond, Virginia. It was hidden in the remains where General Robert E. Lee's statue once stood. Stay tuned and we'll take a look at what they found. Federal civilian employees will get an average pay raise of roughly 2.7% in 2022. Based on an executive order signed by President Biden, all general schedule employees will receive a 2.2% increase to their basic pay, plus a 0.5% increase beginning January 2nd. The actual raises will depend a lot on where they work due to locality pay. In 2022, federal employees in Seattle will receive the highest raises at 3.2%, and in Washington, D.C., federal employees will receive raises of roughly 3%, and in San Francisco, they will see raises of 3.14%. President Joe Biden is considering former Federal Reserve Governor Sarah Bloom Raskin to lead regulation and supervision at the central bank as part of a slate of 3 nominees to its Board of Governors. Raskin used to serve in the Treasury Department under the Obama administration. She could bring a tougher regulatory profile to the country's most powerful bank's oversight role. This position was vacated recently by Randall Quarles, a Trump appointee who angered progressives with a more Wall Street-friendly approach. Sarah Bloom Raskin is married to Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin. Former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers said that student loan debt relief is a regressive policy that mostly benefits high-income households. The statement comes in response to President Joe Biden's recent extension to the postponement of student loan payments. The total value of outstanding student loans in the United States currently stands at over $1.6 trillion. But according to a 2020 report from the Brookings Institution, most of that debt belongs to higher income households. According to Summers, student loan debt relief is damaging to the economy. Summers also said in a tweet, "The right place for reform is in student lending to prevent subsidy to institutions that rip students off and to replace loans with grants." A recent Axios Momentum poll indicates that young Americans increasingly prefer socialism. Mary Eberstadt is a novelist and author, and we had a chance to speak with her about some of the root causes as to why socialism is so popular among young Americans and what is the counterweight to these socialist policies, as well as what should be taught to students in schools throughout the country. Here's a look. Mary Eberstadt, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Now, Mary, I want to ask you, why do you think young people right now seem to have such a favorable opinion of socialism?
Partly because they have been deliberately miseducated about their country's past. It's been generations now that a certain kind of Tony anti-Americanism has been dominant, especially on university and college campuses. And what young people need to understand is that there are deep reasons why they're being fed that narrative. They are being deprived of the grandeur of their country's history and its lessons. And the reasons for this are that they are the backbone of a political movement that exploits them, called progressivism. And I think there's a lot of re-education in order and a great need for them to understand the history of communism, the history of socialism, and other important truths of which they have been deprived by their teachers for political reasons.
Is it progressivism or is it at the fundamental root Marxism?
Marxism, of course, has a lot to do with this, again, in ways that not all young people are even conscious of. I can say this with authority because when I was in college, which was decades ago, Marxism was prevalent on all the elite campuses. And it's coming back in this sort of softer form that goes by socialism, but that shares a lot of Marxist precepts.
And how important is it, when we talk about studying history, to study other communist forms that have taken place and have failed, to understand that, socialism in its infancy will and can potentially lead to much more devastating things?
That's absolutely critical. It was always said that socialism just hadn't been tried right, and this was used to excuse failure after failure in every country that attempted to implement a Marxist regime. What students need to know that they are not told, what would make them far less interested in socialism, would be working knowledge of the tragedies that have transpired under plans to re-engineer human beings on a mass scale. We're talking about the great famines, we're talking about other collectivized activities that have ended up imprisoning and murdering people in the name of an abstract, higher Marxist good. And history is littered with these examples, as we know. And letting children and teenagers in on that fact is an important part of the teaching of history tomorrow.
What do you think is the counterweight to these socialist policies? What needs to be taught to students in schools throughout the country?
The history of failure of collectivist experiments, number one. Number two, and this is in no particular order, the grandeur of American history with all of its problems. Number three, the economic vitality and material abundance of the free enterprise countries relative to the collectivist countries. And number four, the way in which socialist regimes, Marxist regimes, communist regimes have suppressed not only religion, but the family, have suppressed any other potential contender for people's loyalties. These are all easily ascertainable facts, and we need leaders to voice them, and we need teachers to impart them.
Mary Eberstadt, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
NBA star Enes Kanter Freedom sent his appreciation to former President George W. Bush for his letter in which he congratulated Cantor on becoming a United States citizen. Bush wrote that he appreciates Cantor Freedom's commitment to the founding ideals of our nation. Enes Kanter Freedom showed off Bush's letter in his tweet on Monday and thanked the former president. He said, "I'm proud to be a citizen of the United States of America, the land of the free and home of the brave. I will never take for granted the freedoms that I have here." Kanter Freedom has been very outspoken over China's human rights abuses, including the brutal organ harvesting that takes place at the hand of the Chinese Communist regime. In Richmond, Virginia this week, historians uncovered a 130-year-old time capsule full of history. The box with a variety of relics was found in the remains of where a General Robert E. Lee statue once stood. Here's a look at what they found.
The 36-pound box was found in water in a little corner of the pedestal. Conservation experts had to be very careful as they pulled out the damp contents. Civil War era artifacts.
They were more waterlogged than we had hoped, but not as bad as it could have been.
Pulled from the box were newspapers, buttons, coins, and knickknacks made from what appeared to be wood, carved into a Confederate flag. They also found bullets, mini balls, a type of bullet used in the Civil War. One of the most eye-catching and unique finds is cash that we haven't laid eyes on in decades.
A $1 bill, bunches of them.
Confederate money. Handling each piece with delicacy for preservation. Conservators gently separated the bills to dry. The old books have been underground for over a century and need some drying off too, so they stored them in the freezer.
We're going to put those in the freezer, and so putting items in the freezer buys us a lot of time, and they will eventually be dried. We're going to put silica gel in the freezer after they're completely frozen. That will help draw off the moisture from the books.
The Library of Virginia holds records suggesting that when this box was packed with items, dozens of Richmond residents, organizations, and businesses contributed, adding up to about 60 objects in the copper box, including Confederate memorabilia.
It looks like the Virginia seal actually on it.
Historical records led to speculation that they'd find a rare and historically significant photo of deceased President Abraham Lincoln. And among the items were indeed photographs.
By Carlton McCarthy.
Conservators found an image from an 1865 magazine that seemed to show a figure grieving over Lincoln's grave, but it did not appear to be the much anticipated photographs. As the contents inside were taken out piece by piece, they appeared to match the description of the 1887 time capsule they'd been looking for, marking the end of the long search for the elusive capsule. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
And that's all we have for you on the Capitol Report today. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Steve Lance, and we'll see you next time.